procedurally exhaust Ari and said, our first line to generate spirituality for any debates, topic, and debates can be for educational ones, some debates are excluded. These sonic images never read the human you said initial one of the surveys with almost 3 episodes, you did 20 songs, I've done production, I've said, and the nation police, for 20. Question was for the words, worded by the reason of the general, because the terminal songs of subjects, because the probably takes by the law, not calling because a part for one of the free ladies who reproduce, a policing and displaying of voice and the outline polling, the murder, responsibly referred to every police speech and tone of voice. Failure to comply by racism and vulnerable to violence, refusing to hear after giving voice to policing of 3, interrelated expression of the sonic color line, the conceptualization, categorization, conceptual, normal, the order of the sonic line clauses, which is limited by a right historical creature, slight stereotypes, and they put it over as an alien in front of our for the CDC, looking at the front of the labor of the sort of one. British results of the direct line, but taken the deliberate consideration of innovation through bias policies, colonial rules, and laws, strip of independence, emphasizing to brainwash, circle, and legitimate debate policies for further different language speaking Indian members considered Indian culture violence, or existing colonialism, several relational colonists, disempowered colonized people, form education government, empowering alien young people from their cultures, and adoption of Western language standards, society, leading to the role of professional force, cementing system of culture, region 305. Stop the identifying the provincial foreign unpronounceable name, unservable asking alien funding, selling culture, possession of foreign subject members of burdens of foreign discrimination, daily like non-American names, strange and funny, role by provincial foreign American investors, rebel action, one is child, mainstream by taxes, an example, ideal notion of assimilation in 2025, the cause of American education for Indian students in their life, on 25. Many Indian students are studying in the U.S. increasingly choosing U.S. universities, but at what cost? Reason that recent difference in Indian students become violent, victim of violent attacks, pressure with this alarming and student face hate from their discrimination, which is a rise in xenophobia, subject occupants, discriminatory rules within inescapable working with the categories of violent options like solid commodities, Title 13. Indian discriminatory labor to the word of verbal demons, rights, racial American salvation, immigrant workers are also responsible for separate from the Indian Americans, people are those different separate alien groups, salvation in America, racialized, mystical, exotic foreigners, growing towards the market, because it means to keep from others, the things of the Indian members, men, who are needed, suffering from the continent, new age, origin, perpetuating its power, spiritual leadership, for foreigners, and form of racial capital to market for and faithfully exotic commodities, one of the ordinance, providing Arab salvation, American, politics, representation, useful lesson for elucidating salvation, American immigration ambiguity, debates, Western linguistic trends, colonial modern day impact, and psychic violence, and salvation, like race, from the space, based on slow, adverse, salvation, sonic performance, critical engagement, auditory working, influence, introspective, self-expressive, what's meant to temporarily breaking the economy to what meaning has 22. Multiplicity of science bringing explanations to sound generally vital issues related to text within emerges and sonic components resistant to colonial balance and power manifest in our spring during media for the West Central Chart and recurs in one many teachings, salvation, listening parameters, coalition, encouragement, typical approach, sonic experiences, and prevalent academic transported, so pandemics, common trend, common attribute, racial common order, European, understood originally every year, consider exotic, ontological, regional, understanding, content, engagement, critical engagement, and scheme, and exotic, anti the root, content, and forward, the language over the rest of the language, only every name, making house 22. Ideas of residence and plurality, temporalities, interconnectivity, shared also on experience on their object, economies broken into multiplicity of the meaning and making. The human must be the same way that the performer experiences selfhood, embedded sign for knowledge, subject to thinking of language, words, meaning, only understood and explosion of sounds, and languages, economies, of word, subject, object, word, meaning, language, reference to the word, other, being that literal self, strikes us by version, abstract, to try to quantify your residence, uses, must be unique. Your residence that connects with the original without this element, because your approach, linguistic enunciation, race, level, cohesion, and breakdown, other can be a recognition, be a plain racial, other, chapter, lesson 13. Laws for murder, couple of linguistic orders and ideas and work performing them confirm where you like sensible styles of Asian American by making them to race so different. Legal discourse, production, reality, enunciation, interpolativity, legal conformity, and body action, key to understanding racialization. Say representative population, submission to really understand most effective way to use large numbers of people to really submission, some is a ritual, dramatic ritual, only which will play, recognizable and play anymore. The enemy, cut the card there. The reason inherently before the reject ideas, debates, just against the point of meaning back to the front of skull, 19, all debates before all debaters of color, and body that prefer the meanings, the message, coaches, the debates, judges, debate, models, before the thoughts of the game because debating a critical applications, life-changing and power debates, something as much as the thing debating about the does on the other part. I think you should perform to be verified, notional understanding, debate space, and de-emphasize the value of performance by setting your setting notions. Cut the card there. I can send marked.
Yes, please send marked, and then in the marked doc, so in the initial doc it says insert microaggression card. Was there
no, that was, I sent out another email chain, we did not read that line, we read an extra card, that is now absent.
Okay.
Wait.
I already sent that.
Oh, you already sent that card.
Okay, yeah, can you mark the other cards? Just mark the whole card.
Alright, that's so real.
If I overheat, I will throw up.
And then we don't care much, but one of the judges said they prefer if cards are not sent in the body.
Oh, sorry. I can resend that. There's just one extra one. Yeah, if you just want to make the mark in the...
Yeah, I'll do the mark.
Yeah. Jamie, could you maybe open the door so we get a little bit of ventilation in here?
It's overheating.
I think
Oh, that's so nice.
It's a little better already, I think, actually.
Yeah.
Alright. We'll send out the 1 minute speed. It's just 1 off. It's not really an off. You can just, it's okay. It's another chat. There's going to be analytics that are not on the doc. They'll be at the bottom sign.
Okay, I just sent the mark docs.
You're good.
For the cards, the part in red is the launch towards the mother. The part.
Alright.
It's second. Okay, so, sorry, the doc I sent has first off, second off. Ignore everything on first off. It's only second off. I can send another doc if I want. Ignore everything under first off. Where it says second off, huh?
First word frameworks.
Yes, but the first word for the first off is also framework, so just make your own. It's the exact same thing, just differently.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Alright.
So it should be the Sexton card, not the Wilderson card.
Yo, Doris said Sexton, yes.
Alright. Everyone good? Alright. Someone's gonna refer.
Frameworks and theorizations must center blackness and analysis of the antagonistic relationship society has towards blackness. Racial progress is infeasible without blackness at its center. Section 10. Every analysis that attempts to understand the racial state without a kind of black existence, which is all meaningless in the middle equivalence or returning interest in afterthought, is deemed to be essential. Black existence doesn't represent the true reality, but it does in its totality. Every attempt to defend the rights and liberties of the ladies victims of certain perpetual fail to make substantial gains of silence and creative black people without black people on board. The only option will involve greater alliance with an anti-black civil society and magnification of state power. The politics of liberation entails total revamping of society. There is no going back and forth slavery and going beyond what it entails revolution. And the role of the non-black people in the round is to surrender to black studies as the 3 pillars of social death, define the slave nature of blackness, explain how blackness is always situated as an object of accumulation and fungibility in civil society, excluded from humanity. Waterston 17. The same is legally made a commodity, they're concluded from the category of human. The same is socially dead, overly contributed, violent, daily, alienated, types of not recognizing, familiar structures broken apart, and generally dishonorable performance, other actually social death. The same goes to the very level of their being, defining their ontology, the same experience, the same incentive, object of accumulation of fungibility, emancipation, not convenience, and recognized domination. Black people socially dead, it becomes apparent. A black person on the street should faces vulnerability to violence, just like on the plantation. Anti-black violence can be ignored by white society. Blackness itself is criminalized. And the 1AC is the link. Their attempts to find self-affirmation and possibilities within performance is not a strategy afforded to the slave. The explosion of blackness from the category of the human prevents any ability to articulate agency or subjectivity through performativity and instead intensifies the conditions of bare life. Murillo 13. The slave direction is so deep that even performance is owned by the master, by the anti-black world. How my agency manifests its slavery totalizes the subjection of the black in such a way that blackness belongs to the master of black objects, and these objects are inherently performative. How can agency happen in forms of action do not transcend, but rather index only particular federations of power and modes of subjection? Their supposed enjoyment was captive to the masters or the tool to the further subjection, or were they performing in the presence of their masters? The person that woke his blackness before the throne of the master, or they stole away in community gatherings, but even this is automatically criminalized in ways in such a way that agency evidence here is a perceptual deep that movement criminalized by the master on every level. These acts are an index of slavery, of terror, and of subjection. And the alternative is to refuse the 1AC and the structures of anti-blackness, refuse the world itself. Our politics of refusal is a radical embracement of incoherence to negate the negativity of blackness. Waterston 17. After following besides impossible affirmation of identity, non-black, divided against blackness, affirmation of blackness impossible without affirming the violence that structures black subjectivity, Afro-press, illuminates the failures of civil rights, concerning progress. It is not possible to affirm blackness without affirming anti-black violence. Attempts at recognition and inclusion in society will only result in further social death. Blackness remains the object of gratuitous violence demonstrated by police murders, mass incarceration, and surveillance. The only way out is to negate that negation. The effort to produce a coherent subject is anti-blackness. We choose pessimism to understand black liberation as a politics of refusal to affirm as an embrace of disorder and incoherence, misplaces of faith in police to do something other than maintain the institutions sustaining anti-blackness. Afro-press can be used to critique liberal discourses upon anti-black foundations, only reconfigure about them and abolish the institutions that produce control and murder black subjects. Systemic dispossession and murder is the system. No amount of review boards will eliminate the sacrifice disposed to the unacknowledged ways we perpetuate anti-black racism. To speak in generalities, to speak from a position of anti-black movements against capitalism, patriarchy, or gender mean nothing if they seek to abolish the totality of anti-blackness. Thus, the role of the ballot is to allow black people to engage in refusal spaces like debates, alternative frameworks, rely on the direct position of blackness to render their theory coherent. On their case. First, we get a response to the rebuttal. We should be able to read our own method and compare models, but no word as to why you lose your offense just when your model is better. Second, if we win the ontology claims, that means their evidence about solids being a root cause is wrong. There's no root cause besides the little bit only economy. Third, cross out section 10. Even if the movement is good, it is uniquely bad for black people because it casts them as lower class citizens who further aligns with an anti-black forward. Fourth, cross-apply ontology and the link to their Cecilio 19 evidence. Black bodies cannot perform, which means your method is uniquely bad. Ready for cross?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay. Can I just, yeah, so you say in our case that we link in because our performance make it so that black people cannot engage. So back when India was colonized, Indians were also facing the lowest ladder struggle. Why is it specifically unique to only black people?
Yeah. Right. You want to go? Okay. So our point is, like, we can agree on all the anti-Indian sentiment that happened back in, India and all the bad things that have happened in India. But our point is that in the current world that we live in, you have performed a performance critique, right? You have labeled why your performance is good.
Yeah.
Our argument is that there are three unique pillars that define the social death of blackness, and those three pillars means that the black body cannot effectively communicate because its words are co-opted by the white academy. The link is basically saying we cannot communicate, which means we cannot perform. And the fact that we cannot perform, and you knew that coming into this round, is you exploiting the fact that the black body cannot perform in order to win.
Alright, can I have a question?
Sure.
Are there any spikes in the app?
Spikes, tricks, preempts.
Yeah, anything like that?
What counts as a
Any
spike?
independent reasons to affirm?
Any independent reasons to affirm other than Indosonics?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything that would move our offense besides the last thing?
What could you give like an example? Like
No.
what counts as that?
I mean, like, is there anything that if you win on case is defense to ours?
Yeah, I don't know, what that means.
Okay, you're good. Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Okay. So you say that you say that black bodies cannot do any performance because they're like put in white academia.
Yes.
Right? So how does the ballot change that?
Alright, a few things. One, we're not saying that the judges' ballots are supposed to be solving any anti-blackness. That is not the approach we're taking, just to be very clear.
Yeah.
Our argument is that there has been anti-black violence in this round. That is why the alternative is to refuse the 1AC, which you were at the 1AC. Our argument is that the judges should just fight back against the anti-blackness that has occurred in this specific round. We're not trying to solve it.
Anti-black?
It's the link. If we win the link, then we're winning in round 9.
No, sorry. Like, what's the why
You
are
have
we
to win the
anti?
link.
It's the whole performance thing as to why performance is not a strategy afforded to this
Wait, do you
lane.
have to win the link to win the cat? Like, do you have to win the link?
We're gonna make warrants in rebuttal as to why all we need is framework and a link. I guess you can make
You
very
need to
strong
win the link.
explanations.
Framework.
You can make very strong explanations as to why we need a link. We're not just gonna give you that across. Can I have a question?
Sure.
What does your app do for black people?
It tears now. We're gonna make arguments into how it helps in the rebuttal.
How it helps them?
Like that, hold on. We're gonna make claims on that in the next speech. Because that's for us. That's what we're gonna have. Okay, I'll send, actually, I'm gonna say something for us.
Okay.
We're gonna, will kind of just be on.
Anything not on the top.
All in those.
So everything's on the top.
If there's anything off the top, like,
This time.
yeah. But if I'm not ready, now, this round is functionally over when they've conceded the removal of the judges to maximize Brown energy. Then try to stand up in their second rebuttal and give a new rule to judgery, new rule that has no way for us to debate because we will not know how to filter our offense in the first rebuttal because then we won't be able to engage in clash. And the only time we can have clash in the first time we should be collapsing our arguments. It's a time screw for us which backs any fairness in the round, which means you can't engage in anything. Then. Extend the role of the judge to maximize Brown energy. 1. On framework, weigh the app against a mutually exclusive counter method or DA draw method. Links must be sent to the app. Anything else is arbitrary and self-serving. Asking the judge to a balance between different groups of people is a violent model that should be rejected. We have presented a specific method that should resolve balance by enforced by the sonic color line and filter all K offense through the underlying thesis of cultural erasure and exploitation through Western linguistics. Since cases a DA to the alt, since only salsa cases, since only the case salsa South Asian cultural erasure. 2. Case outweighs South Asian identity exists as a deviancy from black white paradigm that society structures society that makes the app a necessary prerequisite to break these modes of understanding. Then perms do both use sonics as a lens to approach the alt and see best for accessibility is subverting the alt. Traditional academic presentation only the one who sees projects of sonics can solve cultural erasure. Focus on explicit divide between particular identity group forecloses possibilities of libertary acts of engagement. 4. Perm parallel strategies they do them and we do us. Sonics are key for us to disrupt Western linguistic standards and the net benefit is to create a space of sonic review. Our future, the South Asian parallel strategies to resolve both impacts. Only the perm provides a specific linguistic praxis for South Asians to resist erasure. The alt and the app operate on 2 parallel vectors that don't overdetermine political strategies, but is inclusive of different methods to resolve nuanced violence, marginalized communities which face is not inherently anti-black. Their totalization precludes survival of other groups. Aaron 16. To the extent of struggles or to reduce the validate of forms of subjectivity produced under white supremacy, these struggles can be aligned. The black struggle is so subject to the self-population constituents only for wrongs and non-black, so that does not reinforce anti-blackness is to negative identity politics avoid recomposing human community with the same power, thereby opening up overlapping struggles against white supremacy. This only indirect annihilation, isolation between the same self-population of the non-black life and any political program of the same self-population at the end of the world, or perhaps conceive this parallel vectors into fires that crossing features to retain unthinkable vanishing point socio-historical conjecture. On the links, 1. No link. A. Framing issue. It's a link of omission. The one is performance is a method to solve for Brown violence. We haven't made a solvency claim for black people or forced them to labor or engage in the movement. This means all links are irrelevant. B. Non-unique. The link are all political, not the plans, not the plans method. Any risk that the app is a disruption of the anti-black world they describe turns the links. 6. Will turn the links. Framing issue. Their link are broader structures to whiteness. First, explain how violence and structured oppressions are unfortunately sonic colonized through policing and Western conception of legibility. The only risk, the app rejection of the disrupt systems are responsible for anti-black violence, but this is distinct from prescribing a method for all anti-black violence or whiteness as a whole. Any sonic resistance or performance exists in coherence to Western mode of understanding the event through fusion of sonics, rejecting notions of sonic colon rather than submitting to the Western Academy's call for legibility and academic respectability. Refuse to work within epimistic canon, creating a space to combat the system. B. Cognitive explosion. The UNAC sonics unlocks new modes of understanding by breaking the subject-object dichotomy of Western linguistics and traditions, and rather than breaking them down into multiplicity of meanings, the sonic experience of the UNAC can result in a cognitive explosion to restructure society. And C. Disruption solves the UNAC's project of disruption of the structures responsible for perpetuating anti-black violence. There's no trade-off. Already 19. This system is antithetical to the back and break our reaching can be meaning beyond academic disrupting curves. This will lead to more just society contributed remain within the active constructing academy, which they can be happy for academia once simultaneously marginalized. That will have the power to shift the academia's institutionalized culture by critiquing models, questioning ways of researching by modeling for communities. We take collective action. And ontology is wrong. If they try to know like this, then don't give them the case since it means the perm solves and change is possible. Can you mark it? It's just the last 2 cards.
Yeah.
Just the last 2 cards?
Yeah.
Alright, you're good. No problem. No dogs, all that right. It'll start on RK, so another one same order. Start on RK, specifically the Wilderson 17 opens, like framework on RK. Everyone good?
Your K first, right? Okay.
Everyone good?
One leg of framework of women ontology and limits two unique reasons to get on the floor. First is communication. It means the black body cannot effectively communicate because black words are always co-opted by the white academy, which is enough for you to immediately go on presumption because it means we cannot get communicating this communicative activity which implicates to all of the conceded arguments the apple inevitably go for. This round was skewed affirmative because we cannot communicate. But then secondly, overcoding. Ontology overcodes the entire debate. It means you auto-negate it as a prerequisite of discussions of what you do in the world because you must theorize on whether or not the world is even ethical. For instance, it is only possible through the dereliction of black flesh. At that point, all we need to win is the framework extended three pillars which they have not specifically responded to. The true and false, lastly, fuck of it all, the alienation, the erasure of ties of culture, heritage, gender dishonor, the underrepresentation of blackness in politics, and overrepresentation of blackness in prisons, all prove that the black body is ontologically dead. At that point, extend the link to a strategy of performance in this round is not a strategy afforded to the slave. The what is he has exploited our lack of agency. They say the link should be specific to the app. It was. You could have read the same app, but our point is that the fact that you have read it through a performative lens is bad because it specifically skews out black agency. But then secondly, they say it was a link of omission. No, it was not. You have specifically made this round of performance critique, and you conceded that the link is to your performance critique, which you conceded is a grammar that is not affordable to the slave, all of which was conceded. But then next, they say that all links to the political now, not the plans method. No, it is literally directly linked to the plans method. It is specifically about how they're performative. Then next, they say you should weigh the app. Weighing the app in this round is nothing but a Prussian Olympics. However, our argument is that the 1AC has been anti-black, and that is enough for you to refuse the 1AC insofar as they've conceded the alt. They've conceded that if we can win any reason as to why any anti-blackness that has occurred in this round, that is enough for you to refuse the 1AC per the Williamson evidence, and that's all we need. You have an ethical obligation as a judge to refuse anti-blackness, and you see that happen in this round because they conceded the links. Then, next, they tell you to frame the round. On their framing of the round. Frame the round through social death of blackness and conceded the three pillars and sex, which is the reason for our method because this is a prior ethical question. Extend sex in any movement that does not center blackness against black people's lower classes is because it invests into the literal desire to own anti-blackness and further aligns with an anti-black world. They say case outweighs one, sex and takes out the prerequisite, but two, you've conceded the three pillars, which means there's no grammar to sever the theorized blackness. Your method cannot change. But then next, on the role of the judge, TKO, you've conceded all affirmative theorizations must center blackness for the Sexton 10 evidence. You can cross by the warrant here, which means that your advocacy only forces judges to further invest into the middle because you only lead to further lies within the anti-black world. But then secondly, conceded your role as the judge is based on the narrow position of blackness for Fazan's analysis at the end of our case, which means that you should prefer our role as the judge, which is to allow black debaters to engage in the round, which means you auto-negate. But then next on the perms. If women ontology implicates to all of the perms, you cannot perm if you are saying you are racist. We are winning competition, which definitely takes out the perm. But then also, the advocacy that we are making, our specific fault is not about solving anti-blackness. They've misread our argument, specifically about refusing the 1AC. You can not do the 1AC and refuse the 1AC. That does not make sense. You cannot let them get away with any perms. Do not let them get away with saying you, do you, and you, and we do us. They conceded that their advocacy specifically leads to further entrenchment within the anti-black world. That next on ontology wrong, literally all they said was ontology wrong, progress is possible. That is not enough. You cannot just do that as far as you conceded three pillars, which means ontology is true. Then next, on the Aaron 16 evidence, all they say that the alt and the alpha operate in two parallel vectors. No, they don't. It's supposed to be linked to the alt to the neg, which by the way, you're the neg, you're not the app. Then next, on their K. Even if their movement is good, it's uniquely bad for black people because the casting of lower class citizens through further lies with the anti-black world. The Sexton 10 framing evidence we read is uniquely key in this round. It's a question of sequencing. Solving for anti-blackness is a prior ethical question because they conceded that any movement that does not center blackness casts black people's lower class citizens because it invests into the little desire, which means their movement does that. But then, the links are all you need to resolve the clash on this round. None of their arguments respond to the links. Good for cross.
Yeah.
Student knowledge.
but you can do that. You good?
Yeah.
You spoke first. We're talking about.
Oh wait, my. Why are performance like racist?
Once again, our argument is that the black body does not have agency, which means it cannot perform. Your performance in this round is exploiting the fact that the black body cannot perform to give yourself an advantage, which is anti-black.
Wait, how is it giving us an advantage by letting me a space to survive? Why is that?
Because you are able to, like, our argument is not that you should not have a space to survive, right? Our argument is that you could have read the same K without the Sonics part. The fact that you have read it through specifically, like, Sonics is something that's not
How
affordable.
else would that?
Our argument is, like, you could have read the same advocacy, literally the same exact K, but without using it.
How would it work? How would Sonics work without actual Sonics? How
Well, okay, here's the thing. Have you seen a Hindu phobia K before then? Let me retract my further statement. No. They're not really. I'm not saying they're the same. I'm saying, have you ever seen a Hindu phobia K in the past?
Why?
I'm just.
Alright, maybe. Probably not.
Okay, well, I'll tell you this. A lot of Hindu phobia Ks are able to counteract Hindu phobia while still, like,
Why are
talking.
you relating Hindu phobia case to Hindu science? Like,
It's not about Indo-Sonics, and it's not about Hindu phobia. I'm talking about.
Hindu phobia here.
I'm giving you an example of an identity critique. It's not specific to your method. You can replace it with anti-blackness. The point still stands. Our point is that.
Like, why does that sound for brown? Why does that solve for brown people? What method solves for brown people other than Sonics? What arguments have you made that X method can solve for brown people other than Sonics?
Well, one, we made the Sexton framing analysis that your method failed. It's not our burden to tell you
Why
how you
does-
can solve for your K. It's
Wait,
your burden to
where
do
does
that.
the Sexton evidence conclude that Sonics fails for brown people?
It specifically says any movement that does not center blackness fails. You can explain it however
Why?
you want.
What's the
You can-
word line behind fails?
Because it furthers alliance with an anti-black world by casting the black people as lower class citizens unwillingly. It's in the
How does that
evidence.
fail for brown
I'm going to
people?
take a question. We've been on this for 2 minutes. Just to clarify really quickly, what does your K do for black people?
RK specifically breaks down Western like structures of like whiteness and takes it down, which helps black people, which helps price solving.
Okay, so if we win the Sexton 10 evidence, doesn't that like mean your advocacy bad?
No, because our advocacy can still be good for brown people.
But if it's bad for black people, then is there a point if you're good for one type of people, but then you're bad for another type?
Wait, why is it the duty of the affirmative to solve for everyone?
I'm not saying it's the duty of the affirmative to solve for everyone, but if we've isolated a reason as to why the affirmative is bad for black people,
How
so
is
I'm
it
not
bad
actually
for them?
asking.
You haven't isolated what's bad for them. All you said is the movements are bad. Like, why is it bad for them?
Okay, this is just going back and forth. Let's move on. Can I have a question?
Specifically, so your link is the only reason that our Sonics links is because of a performance that's not good for black people, right?
It's the fact that you are using it specifically to be an advantage. Can I have a question? What's your theory of power? What's your theory of power? Can we take flex? Oh. Is that illegal? Time starts now. What's your theory of power? Never mind. That was 4 seconds.
already like into the firm sonic to general spirituality for any individuals. Luckily, here we would say case we have been solving this identity exists as a deviancy from black and white paradigm structure society and makes it have a necessary prerequisite to break down these modes of understanding down. Look, the implication is that they have said that the only way is to prioritize blackness and blackness literature. What they have done is concede the fact that South-Asian identity is away from the black and white paradigm, which means that it functionally excludes Aryan out of this round completely. That has been dropped. Second, we would say that they have also conceded Western structures separate word and meaning right now, which means that their advocacy renders zero meaning in this space because we have not solved back. The only solvency is through solvency because it brings back effective resonance, creates cognitive explosion through effective resonance. It's unique to sonic and the only way that any other form of art itself would have all of that phenomenon can be done is through sonic. That's really important because what that means is that right now in this space without sonics you're not able to really put back the word and meaning together because Western linguists have broken down that economy has been spread out to see as one AC. More importantly, they have conceded one AC schooling that debate is inherently performative because otherwise we are conceding to the real preconceived structure of the economy between word and meaning. Also, it's a critical advocacy for that is life-changing and empowering. Sonics is the only advocacy that is prerequisite for their advocacy to be heard. Then, all the outwards are two parallel facts that do not overturn political strategy inclusive of different methods because we're solving for South Asian identities. They can solve for their blackness, but what we have been saying is that even if you want to buy all of their arguments of how the black body cannot perform, we would say it's cognitive explosion. It puts back the word to meaning, it gives back the voice to the people who are marginalized. Then, okay. We would say that ontology is bad a framing issue because none of it explains the illegibility of the South Asian subject, only linguistics explain it, which means that it's the only case that can be solved and be done above. Cognitive explosion is really important. We want to see science to also new ways of understanding by breaking down subject object economy and with something with the listening traditions. Look, they have conceded that right now in this space it is harmful because they are unable to project, no advocacy is being able to project because of these Western linguistics that have been dominating this field as well. The European standards have been long aside far ago. That means the sonics is the only form of solvency because without that path no advocacy can be heard. Sonics is key because it breaks down the Western structures. That has been conceded because even if they're not trying to use the ballot to change something, we are, and that's where we say that we come as a prerequisite. More importantly, we would say disruption solves as well as our advocacy is not separate. We don't say that black people are excluded from our advocacy. Simply that by playing sonics, you're able to have your advocacy be heard in the first place. Also, there leads to broad structures of whiteness, brings explain how violent the structures of repression are enforced, and it's like policing of Western conception of legibility.
Sorry, quick flex. What was that last thing?
It's here. You want me to read it again?
Yeah.
Is that how it's okay? There are links to the broader structures of whiteness, words explain how violent the structures of oppression are enforced through solid Yeah, sure. I won't read all of that.
Alright, that's our problem. Alright. We're just gonna be ontology, role of the judge, and then everyone good? All good? Alright. How we go my first?
Vote neg on framework, they're listening, but they are not hearing Bashir. We're going for communication, extend that the black body cannot effectively communicate, which is enough for you to immediately vote neg on presumption, because Bashir cannot communicate in an activity that is reliant on communication. The ontology words were fully conceded coming out of rebuttal, which means that Bashir is socially dead, and that is why you might be leaning after right now. You can listen to his speeches, but you cannot hear, and that's TKO, which at that point, because they've conceded that cross applies to all the conceded arguments that the app is inevitably going to go for. At that point, extend the 3 pillars. They have not responded to the 3 pillars specifically, which gives us access to ontology, which is why you're believing that the black body is socially dead. Remember, the 3 pillars are gratuitous violence, which is violence for no reason at all that isn't based on any transgression of civil society. Second is natal alienation, losing all cultural heritage. And third is general dishonor, overrepresentation of blackness in prisons, and underrepresentation of blackness in politics. So ontology was fully conceded, and they say that progress is possible with no warranting, but the 3 pillars prove that the black body is in a fixed state of social death. New in summary, they say ontology doesn't explain South Asian struggle. It's not supposed to. You've conceded that is literally the only way to theorize black pain, and you've conceded warrants that the rebuttal is far too late within the round. But look, we don't need to prove solvency. The reason you were voting for us is to refuse the racism due to the link. They keep saying it's generic, but it's not. It's about the specific way that they read this act. Even if they can solve the brown struggle, they only further cement blackness into a state of social death, because in this round, they've exploited the fact that the black body lacks agency, and that their strategy of performance is not afforded to the slave. On the role of the judge, we have not conceded their role of the judge. They conceded the analysis that their role of the judge is based on the developing position of anti-blackness, which is enough for you to air ours, which allows Bashir to engage in refusal spaces like debate, and that's literally an auto-neg ballot. But then, that's another place where you can instantly vote for ontology. Takes out the prereq per Sexton 10. They say we exclude Aryan out of this round, but their advocacy excludes black people out of the entire world even further. Then they should still lose. Plus, they conceded that they can still advocate for their identity without the sonics part. Remember, Sexton 10 is super duper clean here, and they have not responded to it whatsoever. On the framing argument, remember that it's absolutely game over when they concede the Sexton evidence that tells you that their advocacy does not center blackness, which means it has black people as lower class citizens on the perms. Once again, they conceded that you cannot burn racism, you can't refuse and then link it to the K. That's not how it works. Remember, that isn't solving. Remember, we aren't solving for anti-blackness, which only entrenches the black body as socially dead. Go to sonics. A link means that the 1AC was anti-black. Realize that they've conceded the Zimbabwe evidence, which literally tells you that the 1AC was a link, but then they try weighing and tell you that sonics is the only form of solvency and it breaks Western linguistics. But they have conceded Bashir's analysis from rebuttal that tells you that linguistics are built on the suffering of anti-blackness due to ontology, which we have access to, and the liberal economy, which was conceded, which means that you cannot solve for anything they are trying to solve for, because it doesn't cast blackness, which was Sexton 10 ultimately being conceded. At that point, you're going to be looking to the ontology first and the liberal.
Are you all good for Grant?
Oh, yeah.
Time starts now. So, if we don't center blackness, why does that mean we can't tear down Western linguistics?
What?
So your last response was like, linguistics are built on anti-blackness, which means we can't break it down West.
Yeah.
Why?
Because our argument is like, the whole idea of white, this is the whole ontology debate, right? The whole idea of white life is contingent on black death. The fact that the white body gets agency through the lack of agency of the black body, this is what we've been saying since day one. This was communication and rebuttal, which is consistently getting extended. It's the whole idea of like, you're listening, but you're not hearing us. Like, it's not just performative. It's the fact that our words are getting co-opted by the white academy, and that's enough. Like, the Western linguistics are specifically designed to exclude black people. We'll take a question. So, just to clarify, your advocacy is good for black people because it tears down white people, correct?
Yeah, tear down white.
And that's the only way it's good for black people.
It's good for everyone.
Cognitive explosion.
Well, I'm talking about like black people specifically, even if it's good for everyone.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's the cognitive explosion that you said is that the one is marks new modes of understanding by breaking down subject object dichotomy of Western listening skills.
Put the meaning back into words that Europeans have historically done
Yeah,
otherwise.
so we restructure society.
Okay, let's assume the app passes. We put meaning back into words. How does that stop police brutality? Let's assume the app passes and you put meaning back into words. What does that do about cops shooting black kids?
Means their words are
Like
heard.
we're-
There's meaning in their words.
Yeah.
Their words
Okay.
are now heard, not
Police,
just
too
listened.
late. Police aim the gun at you. What do? You're a black kid. Police aim the gun at him. What did he say?
Wait, what? What do you mean?
You said their words are given like value, right? You can talk.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say
this
there's a
is
black kid
responsive
in the
to-
street walking at night, and a police officer aims a gun at him. What does the black kid say?
This is specific to the
Bring down
academia
Western
space that you talk about. That
Nice,
you-
academia. What does the black kid say?
Wait.
We solve backwards.
Like we're
You
breaking down
solve, you
Western
don't solve.
structures
What
that allow
does the
that-
black kid say?
Wait, it breaks down these structures which allow the
Cool,
which allow
the structures
which allow
are
these
broken
white
down.
guys-
What
which
does
allow
that black kid say?
Black kids is put into positions of racism in the first place because we're breaking down the Western structures
Okay.
that have upheld them.
The
in the
West has
first place.
fallen and down with Rome. What does the black kid say?
There is no they aren't being put in that position anymore because the Western.
So you're
structures
solving for
are-
racist cops?
Like
Racist cops are racist because
I
they
asked
are
you
because
being
of
put
the
on a
Western
pedestal by the Western
Okay.
structures.
So under your world, there's no more police brutality.
like
We're solving specifically for the athlete.
okay.
That's
We're
specific.
solving for like space.
That's an honest.
Got like sticky out.
Roll the touch. Yeah. I know it'll be awesome. Anyone not ready? Time start. Now, they have straight up conceded the role of the judges to maximize Brown energy. All they've said is their framework and their role the judge answers this. I want you to look at your flow. You have zero role of the judge that's been given by them. You don't know how to evaluate their arguments. There's no way to flow it. If the role of the judge is to maximize Brown energy, which is straight up been conceded, and then reading a new one, and second rebuttal is the times which is also conceded, means that you're always maximizing Brown energy first, which means you're always voting for Lexington. And they've conceded the Sonic outline. Case outweighs the South Asian identity exists as a deviancy from black-white paradigm that structures society. That makes the app a necessary prerequisite to break down these modes of understanding. That means that them reading center blackness actively excludes me because it assumes the white and black paradigm, no other identities. They don't respond to the Sonic outline, which excludes me and kills me. Them saying that Section 10 concludes that the black no movement can work without blackness at its center does not center brownness because they have conceded that South Asian identity exists as a deviancy from black and white structures, meaning none of their framework stuff matters here. But it's a framing issue. It explains the illegibility of South Asian subject. Linguistics explain this, which is only the case can solve, and that was not the cognitive explosion that the one AC uses sonics to unlock new modes of understanding by breaking down subject-object dichotomy of Western listening standards and rather breaking down into multiplicity, reading the sonic experience of the one AC can result in cognitive explosion to research society. Sonics is always a prerequisite conceded on the one hand that Western structures have long enforced separated word meaning, which means that advocacy cannot be heard in all its meanings. Sonics breaks down linguistics in society, we agree, which is built around racist structures. They say the black body cannot communicate because of the white academy. We solve for that space because we force the academy to hear, not just listen. They say we can draw out of conceive without sonics, but the only way is to break down linguistics, and they've given you no alternative method. This round is clear.
Howard K, roll the judge, good day. Everyone good?
They're listening, but they're not hearing us. We're going for communication. Except that the black body cannot effectively communicate, which is enough for you to immediately vote back on presumption because we cannot communicate an activity reliant on communication. The ontology words were fully conceded coming out of rebuttals. All the responses are too late in the round, and that is why you might be leaning out right now. You can listen to our speeches, but you can't hear us as TKO because it's conceded that cross applies to all of the conceded arguments that the afters got up and extended. They say they solved for the academy, but they've conceded that the whole point of our work is that their advocacy only further re-entrenches blackness into a world that only further re-entrenches blackness into a further alliance with the anti-black world for the Section 10 evidence, and we've repeated that again and again and again, and they're listening, but they're not hearing us. Extend the three pillars which have still been conceded: gratuitous violence, violence for no reason at all, alienation, losing all contrary to general dishonor, over-representation of blackness in prisons, and under-representation of blackness in politics. Now, I'm going to slow down very, very slowly and explain to you why it's TKO. That final focus said nothing about the link. Extend the link. It was fully conceded, which means the 1DC was anti-black, even if it solves for brown violence, and even if it's a prerequisite, it's anti-black. And we have told you this since case. Their use of performance in this round is not a strategy afforded to the slave, and the way they portrayed it in this round is specifically been used to exclude us from this round. That's been conceded again and again and again, and that's why you're going to be voting for us. But then next on the role of the judge. They say we haven't read a role of the judge. No, dog, we've said it, and we've said it, and we've said it, and you're listening, but you're not hearing us. Extend our role of the judge is to allow black people to engage in refusal space of black debate. Now, your role of the judge is based on the derelict position of anti-blackness, which was conceded, and it's conceded that that's an automatic ballot, which means that even if they're solving for racism, and even if they're solving for brown violence, that does not fall under your role as a judge, which is to allow black people to engage. But then next. Section 10 is super clean. They consider that their advocacy doesn't consider black people should have black people's vote.